Is it time to start worrying about the Kansas State basketball program?
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh. You can find me on Twitter at Christian S. Rauh. And thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your daily listen, your first listen every single day. And thank you for being an everydayer. We're getting going on this show. We're having a great time as we get started, as we start the grind on bringing you daily Kansas State Wildcat coverage. And we're going to start with a basketball episode today because a lot to uncover about some news that just dropped earlier on Wednesday afternoon. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Well, Achor Achor is no longer with the team, and head coach Jerome Tang did say that Achor left the program for personal reasons. His actual statement is, quote, Achor and I decided that there are more important things than basketball for him at this time. Tang said, I hope sometime away will allow him to reprioritize things in his life and allow him to finish his degree. We wish him well. My focus is always to help young men become the best version of themselves and to help K-State become an elite program. We are developing men who'll be great husbands and fathers. So it looks like he is done. This is the second year in a row a player has left the team before they got to conference play in the men's program. Achor looks to be leaving due to a lack of playing time. That's what seems to be happening. It did initially seem like it was going to be a dismissal. That's what the initial reports were coming out on Wednesday, saying it was a dismissal. But after this statement, it looks like it's a mutual agreement, leaving because of personal reasons. And that's the case that's happening. So it's definitely getting less time than what he was used to at his last school when he was with Samford. During his time at Kansas State, 6'9", 227, senior forward out of Melbourne, Australia. He just appeared in only 7 games for Kansas State for the Wildcats. And during that time, he averaged 7.3 points and about 2.7 rebounds while he was on the court. He was one of the most, biggest transfers or highly regarded transfers, if you will, coming into this season, signed by Tang during this past offseason from the portal. He was really exciting. He spent his past 2 seasons at Samford, as I mentioned, and during that time, he averaged over 15 points. It was 16.1 points per game, 6 rebounds per game in 2023. So that was obviously a huge addition, and thought he was going to make a great impact for Kansas State this season. It just didn't happen. He also made a name for himself, and that was, if you watched the tournament last year and if you were paying attention to the Jayhawks, Kansas Jayhawks, he made a name for himself while at Samford, playing great basketball against Hunter Dickinson. I mean, he posted him up a couple times, and Hunter Dickinson has been one of the best players in the nation, and I'm sure we all know that by unfortunately seeing it from Kansas on the other side there. But with that being said, regardless, things just weren't great with his performance at Kansas State either way while he was on the floor. For example, this past weekend in the loss to St. John's, Achor only saw the floor for 5 minutes in the game. And we talk about playing time and obviously being concerned. This was one of his lowest games. I think it was the lowest game of the season for him when it comes to minutes. I'm going to look at that right now. And yes, it was. So he did have only 7 against George Washington in the Paradise Jam, only 5 with St. John's. And so it was the lowest one. And for good reason, to be completely honest with you, because in that 5 minutes, and it was all in the first half as well, when Kansas State was actually playing some good basketball. They were playing great basketball in the first half. Achor had a minus 15-point differential during those 5 minutes. First, that's very impressive that he could do that in just a short amount of time. That's pretty egregious. It's a pretty bad number, and it's an easy sign, an easy point at knowing something just isn't gelling with him and the Wildcats. Now, point differential isn't an all-telling tale, and it isn't a stat that's only just on one person. There's 5 or 4 other people on the court playing basketball with you, trying to make that ball not go in the bucket. But if you're only getting 5 minutes on the court and you're seeing a minus 15, if you're seeing it egregiously, right? If you're seeing it terrible on one side or just really good on the other side, that's when I guess I would focus on point differential. But other than that, it's not the greatest stat, but it's a fun one right now. I don't know, actually, fun is the right word, but it's one that definitely points out to a reason to why maybe the playing time wasn't there for him and why there is, or was in this case, some issues, and he is no longer with the team. So with that being said, with the subpar start that Kansas State has right now, they are 6-3, winning record. That's fantastic. They're still on pace to have a better record than they did last year, but with all the NIL and all the big names and all the expectations coming into this season, you have to think that this season so far is subpar, and I think that's the case. So 6-3 or not, I'm going to still call this a subpar start, and I think you're going to agree with me on that one. But I need to know, is it time to begin to worry about the future of this program? And I think there are some rooms for concern. I really do, but I'm not ready to start warming the seats for this coaching staff. Not yet. I'm not ready to say it's time to move on from Jerome Tang and his coaching staff. One, the buyout is egregious, so I'm not even going to dig into that because I don't think that he's even an option at this point, even if you are in that boat. If you are in the ready to move on Tang boat, if you're in that room, if you're in that line, if you have your hand raised, I guess I would tell you to go ahead and put your money in a collective, because as of right now, that buyout's pretty expensive. However, his resume doesn't scream to me like there's an issue, at least just not yet. And we're going to talk about that pretty soon. And because I do think that there is some really good things to talk about when it comes to Jerome Tang and how he sits and how he has performed so well at Kansas State. We know how he all started. And although last season was a disappointment, and so far this year is giving us that same kind of vibes, I think there's still room to be optimistic for this season. For this, I don't think we have to look forward to next season or whatever the case may be. I think there's still a lot of potential to be optimistic about this year as we get closer and closer to conference play. But we're going to get to that in just the next segment, because I do think there's a lot of things to talk about with Tang's resume and so much more. And while the men's team is on this extended break, because I don't know if it's you want to call it a Christmas break or whatever, but they're not playing a game in so long. We're not getting one until next Tuesday from these guys. We're going to take a look at the rest of the schedule and discuss what we should expect heading into conference play this season. And of course, involved with that is going to be Tang's resume here at Kansas State. All of that and more here on Locked On Kansas State. First I want to talk about game time. As we get closer and closer to the Rate Bowl coming December 26th, the day after Christmas, we know it's going to be a tough time traveling and getting there. Ticket prices and the airfare are always so high, and you're going to want to find a way to save every single penny you can if you're planning on making that trip on over to watch the Rate Bowl between Kansas State and Rutgers. I think it's going to be a really good game. I'm excited to see what Coach Kleiman has up his sleeve, what Avery Johnson can do just one more time. I love watching that guy play football. How can you not? And we'll see if a guy like DJ Gittens will play one more game for Kansas State to help his draft stock, because I have a feeling he's going to declare for the NFL draft. With that being said, though, if you're looking for some tickets, I highly encourage you to check out Game Time. Game Time is, in my opinion, the best spot to get tickets, to buy tickets, because you can find all-in-one pricing. You can toggle this feature that shows up front, no surprise fees at checkout. It's the worst thing in the world when you are thinking you're getting this awesome $20 seat and you hit checkout and it becomes almost $50 because of all these fees. You don't get that with Game Time. You get it all in one. You also get to see your seat views, panoramic views in the app before you buy. The lowest price guaranteed. If not, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Can't go wrong with that. So I recommend it. Highly encourage it. Check out Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets at Game Time. Download the Game Time app. And while you're there, create an account and use code LOCKEDONCollege. And not only are you going to get those all-in-one prices, if you use LOCKEDONCollege as a code, you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Well, it's game time. And thank you so much for coming on back to Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. And I'll tell you what, we were talking about basketball today, and there's a lot of things with this basketball team that just aren't going right. Just everything's not firing in all cylinders, right? There's no doubt about that. 6-3. Some of these losses haven't been the best losses in the world. There's no doubt about that. One of the losses coming to St. John's just over the weekend, an LSU loss just this past earlier in the season, and then obviously that loss to Liberty in the Paradise Jam is a close one, but it's still a loss, and we didn't want that to happen. Huge win for Liberty, by the way, getting a Power 4 win, but we gave that to them, right? We don't need that to happen moving forward, and the way that we can do that is obviously take a step up. And Jerome Tang is one of those guys that I think can do that, and I think he's proven already at Kansas State that he can be the guy that continue to lead this team back to where he started, right? He had a great roster coming into year one, and he proved it because he took that team to the Elite Eight, 2 points away from the Final Four. Yes. I mean, that close. And then you head into last season, major disappointment, going from an Elite Eight finish to losing in the first round of the NIT to Iowa. Obviously not the thing you're looking for. And even though you have this exciting new team coming in with NIL, with the money coming in, just not starting off the great way. But the Elite Eight record, 26-10 in his first year, 11-7 in conference. Last year, 19-15, 8-10 in conference, and as we mentioned, missed the NCAA tournament. So with that being said, now there's 20 conference games and so left on the schedule, 2 more non-conference coming up, one coming next Tuesday. So 31 games overall on the schedule, 22 left before the Big 12 tournament. With that Elite Eight, they were the 3rd seed with an 11-7 conference record. You add 2 more games onto that. Now you have 20 games. A 13-7 conference record would put you probably right back in that same spot. Would probably put you in a very comfortable position, not only for making the NCAA tournament, but having a pretty favorable seed in that tourney in March. Now, is a 13-7 conference record doable? I mean, personally, that's a stretch, what we've seen from this team so far, but it would easily put them towards the top of the conference heading into the Big 12 tourney, and I think that's really important as well. Not only do you have to have a good regular season conference play, you got to have some good momentum in that Big 12 conference tourney for a team like Kansas State, who is arguably probably going to be on the bubble, if anywhere, heading into Selection Sunday when we get closer and closer to spring. And that just seems to be the case right now. If you're just the vibes of this team and the way that the rest of this Big 12 conference is looking and the way that the schedule has panned out, it's hard to see a 13-7 conference record for the Wildcats right now. But is it doable? Sure, absolutely. And as of right now, if you're looking at the top 25, AP top 25 rankings, and then taking a look at Kansas State's conference record, or excuse me, conference schedule, 7 ranked conference opponents are on the schedule. So assuming that you just play to your level, let's just say that you fall to every single ranked opponent, but you beat all the non-ranked opponents, at least as of right now, you have a 13-7 record. Now, I don't know if you get your signature moment, your signature win, where the committee likes to see that. And then, everything changes with these net rankings and quad 1 rankings and quad 1 wins and all that good stuff. And it's more confusing than I can tell you what. However, that 13-7 is doable in that case. Tang proved in that first half of the game this past weekend in St. John's that he could get this team to play the way they expect them to. And just getting that into a full game is the concern at the moment. He's got 2 more non-conference games to figure that out before these games really matter. And I think he can do that. Now, who knows how much of a distraction this last thing with Achor Achor, who's now decided to leave the team, really was over this season. I don't think we'll ever know, maybe years down the road, but as of right now, I don't think we're going to know how big of a distraction it was. Maybe we'll get an idea if this team starts to really step it up beginning this next Tuesday. But overall, I do think that there is a chance for this team to turn it around. As good as this conference is this season, if a couple of wins come as signature wins, and I mentioned that just a minute ago with all the confusing things with the committee, maybe a split between Iowa State and Kansas in those conference schedules, because you have to play Iowa State twice, who right now are unbelievable. They are very good. And it's tough to say that on this show, but Iowa State is really good. They're ranked third in the nation right now, and they deserve to be there. Like they are a very good basketball team. But played them 3 times last year if you want to include the conference championship, but in the regular season, not conference championship, but the Big 12 tourney, excuse me. Um, but you played them twice in the regular season and you split during that time. Same with the Jayhawks. You split with them last year in a season where you weren't that good. You had a down year. So if you wanted to get maybe a bounce back, if you wanted to get back on the same path, well, maybe a game like Iowa State could be a signature win. Maybe a win against Kansas, who are showing a little bit of ups and downs. They're not the same Kansas, at least right now, right? There's a couple teams in the Big 12 that are like that. Kansas State is not the only team in this conference who are not living up to expectations. Kansas is one of them. Arizona, oh man, Arizona is definitely one of them. So Kansas State, I think, is in a decent spot. And I don't think that we have to be too concerned right now. And I know I let off this show with asking, is it time to worry? Is it time to really start focusing your worries towards the future of this basketball program? And I think it's not yet. I think you got to just maybe slow the roll just a little bit. Let's see what Tang can cook up. Let's see what he can do in the conference play. Maybe we'll address this conversation again in late January, early February. And if it's not living up to the expectations, maybe I'll change my pitch. Maybe I'll change my ideas, and maybe I'll start being ready to want to warm those seats up. But as of right now, I don't think I'm ready to do that yet. I mentioned 13-7 would do wonders if they finish the conference at 13-7, especially if they win the next 2 conference games. That would probably put them at a 21-10 record with the 31 games heading into the Big 12 tourney. That's pretty impressive. But if you even got a split with Iowa State and Kansas, as I mentioned, those are 2 signature wins, regardless of how good Kansas is this year. We obviously know how good Iowa State is this year. Even if they fall off, that's going to be seen as a very good win, even if you split. And if you split the conference teams, the schedules, a 10-10 record in the conference, I think that most likely puts you at the very minimum on the bubble heading into March Madness and Selection Sunday. Just 2 days ago, ESPN Lenardi put out his bracketology. That's something that I recommend you check out. It's on ESPN. I think they do it about once a week during the season. And as of right now, Kansas State is not there, and for good reason. I don't think they deserve to be in the bracketology for projected bracket at the moment. I don't even think they're a bubble team at this moment. They have to prove that they can play a full game against some good competition. And I think we're not going to get that question answered until we start conference play. However, they had 9 teams sitting in the bracketology in the bracket from the Big 12. So with that being said, I mean, it's completely possible. It's completely possible for doing it. And I want to dig into that here a little more because this team can bounce back and find themselves in the NCAA tournament in March. But what needs to be done in order to make that dream a reality? We're going to discuss that right here, all on Locked On Kansas State. But first, let me talk to you about FanDuel. Get ready to tackle all NFL action, college football action, college basketball action, you name it, with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. This Saturday, Army-Navy game, one of my favorite football games in all of sports, you name it. And it's just one of my favorite atmospheres to be a part of, one of my favorite things to check out. And now you can get involved with FanDuel, put maybe a parlay on one of those games. It could be really fun. So, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook gives you everything you need to place live bets on NFL, college football, and so much more, all in the same place. No need to put your phone down when you're trying to make the bets and tracking your bets at the same time, because when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, check out the latest stats, live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page you place those bets. So visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment count with FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. All right, let's finish up this episode here on Locked On Kansas State. And we're talking about this basketball squad, this men's team, and we're going to dig more into the football, the transfer portal. Don't worry, we're going to get into that this week. We're probably going to finish off the weekend talking about the portal. We're going to talk about the women's team coming up. We got a big game on Saturday. And then, of course, portal chatter is just not going to stop. We still need some more commitments, so we're going to see what happens with that. But we're diving into this men's team. And even though they don't play until next Tuesday, and we're not going to preview this game until Monday, we still have a lot of things to talk about with what's going on with Kansas State. We talked about the Achor Achor dismissal, what happened at the beginning. I shouldn't say dismissal. It was a mutual leaving the program. That's the right words probably to say in that case. And then talked about the remaining schedule of Kansas State. Now, the remaining schedule of Kansas State, their strength of schedule. Listen to this. Their strength of schedule ranks first among all Division I teams according to ESPN's Basketball Power Index, what they call the BPI. First among every single Division I team in basketball right now. So not only are they not vibing, I should say. Not only are they not doing what we'd expect them to do, not only are they not living up to the performance that we were hoping for this season, that 6-3 record, the rest of the way is not getting any better, right? At least in the eyes of strength of schedule, at least in the eyes of how the rest of that is. And that's more of a nod to just how great this Big 12 conference is. How great this conference is. This is a basketball conference. This is the basketball conference. And I challenge anyone to tell me otherwise. But regardless, along with opponent's strength, this also factors in, what's going on with, just look where the games are at. Some of the games are the tougher games that they only play once on the schedule or on the road. Kansas State's got a tough one. So in order that to happen, in order for Kansas State to get back on the right path, to make this 6-3 turn into a, let's just say 21-10, as we mentioned earlier in this show, and head into Big 12 conference play, Big 12 conference tournament with a chance to make it to the tournament, to not go 2 years in a row without making March Madness. What needs to be done? And as I mentioned on the last segment, the recent bracketology had 9 Big 12 teams in the tournament, and Kansas State was not one of them. In the latest KenPom rankings, the Wildcats are 12th among the 16 teams in the conference. So with that being said, 9 teams are making it as of right now in the projected March Madness projections, but KenPom only has Kansas State based on their recent performances as the 12th best team in the Big 12. I think overall in the nation that was 70th. So they're number 70 in a field of 68. They are 70. So they are outside looking in if you're just looking at those metrics, regardless of everything else. And then you're going to not count the automatic qualifiers for some of these mid-major teams that are arguably a lot lower in these metrics. So 70 is a lot farther away from 68 than you think when you're talking about March Madness. Regardless, if that's the way that this ends up, the conference standings once the season is over, then you're saying you're finished 12th out of 16 teams in the Big 12. You're not making the NCAA tournament. If so, it's hello NIT, and hopefully you win at least the first round like you didn't last season. That's the biggest thing. So how do you turn this around? And it starts right off the bat. It starts this Tuesday. And you hope to find a win against Drake. Then you hope to take that into Wichita State, and then you pick up conference play right before the new year starts against Cincinnati, in which, by the way, Cincinnati's ranked 22nd in the nation at this moment. There are some really tough teams in this conference, but you can finish the year off strong. If you finish this year off strong with a 9-3 record, could you imagine winning the last 3 games after that stinky second half against St. John's, putting up a good performance against Drake? Drake's not a pushover. They're a very good team. Putting up a good game against Wichita State. For the record, Drake has not lost yet. Wichita State 8-1. These are good basketball teams. Just because they're mid-major teams, that didn't stop Liberty and Paradise Jam. These are not going to be games that are going to be just walkovers or easy games. They're going to be tough games. So if you can have a good performance against Drake, a good performance against Wichita State, and bring that momentum into Big 12 play right before the new year at home against Cincinnati, a ranked opponent, your first ranked opponent of the season, count me in. That's exactly what you need to get that momentum changed. And that momentum, if they can start the 2025 off with that, and I'll even settle for for two of these three games. I really do think that two out of the next three games have to go in the Wildcats' favor in order to have the right momentum to head into 2025 so they can make this NCAA tournament. But if they do that, and especially if one of those are Cincinnati towards Big 12 play, it's huge. And I think that, overall, when I do look at the rest of this Big 12 schedule and what they've played and what they've done so far in their games in the non-conference schedule, they have the potential to turn it around. They have the potential to turn it around. This team is not a lost cause by any means. And as I mentioned earlier on this show, there are multiple teams in the Big 12 that are underperforming. Now, that could go both ways. That can mean just like Kansas State, they find a way to bounce back and get back up, and then this conference becomes even tougher, or they continue to falter and stay down, and only one team makes that resurgence, and hopefully that's Kansas State. So that can mean two things. Hopefully, in the case of the eyes for us, only Kansas State resurges. Maybe a couple teams falter at the top of the Big 12. Maybe it's in Iowa State when they lose one of the games against Kansas State, like they did last season. Maybe it's the Jayhawks when they split one with Kansas State. Those are the signature wins that they're going to need going into 2025. But I think it's doable. I think it's absolutely doable, and we'll see what happens moving forward. We're going to break down that Drake preview on Monday. We're going to dig into it. Tomorrow, we're going to preview the women's basketball game coming up on Saturday, the Bill Snyder Classic, second annual Bill Snyder Classic. We're going to break that down, do a preview, as well as talk about what transfers are coming into Manhattan this weekend on a visit. As we continue to wait for our first commitment in the portal, we haven't had a commitment yet. We've had 14 people leave in the portal, but not one hit on a commitment. What's taking so long, right? No, this is normal. This is normal. So nothing to really worry about. I think there's only been a total of 24 commitments or something like that so far in the transfer portal across all of college football. So this is not a surprise. These visits are coming right now. Next week, if we don't have some commitments, that's when it'll start to be a problem. I think this is the last weekend where we won't have some commitments. I think it'll start getting really busy here right before the Christmas time. People are going to want to know where they're going so they can tell their families over the Christmas period. But with that being said, we're going to dig into the women's basketball game as well. We're going to preview that because we haven't got to them yet, and they deserve all the diligence in the world. That team is absolutely crushing it right now, and they're being underappreciated, sitting only at 13th in the AP Top 25. But we'll get to them and so much more. Until then, please subscribe, please like the video, and until next time, this has been Locked On Kansas State.